The docking bay of orbital station Varith smelled like coolant and iron, the universal perfume of ships preparing to leave and never look back. Mara Ellison stood at the base of the boarding ramp, her kit bag slung over one shoulder, her departure papers already logged, her seat already assigned. Everything was in order. Everything was ready. Except for the small, trembling weight wrapped around her right index finger. Kale Vera, 7 weeks old, barely the size of a human child's forearm, covered in slate-gray fur that would one day bristle into something genuinely terrifying, had his eyes squeezed shut. His claws, still soft at the tips, curled around Mara's finger with the quiet desperation of a creature that did not yet have words for "please don't go." Kale. Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Hey. Look at me." He did not look at her. Behind her, the ship's boarding announcement echoed across the bay in 3 languages. Mara did not move. It had started 8 weeks ago, when the Varan Accord, humanity's first formal treaty with a species that could, technically, eat them, was still raw ink on a diplomatic plaque. Mara had been assigned to the Cultural Exchange Medical Team, a bureaucratically sterile name for a group of 12 humans tasked with exactly one job: prove that humanity cared about more than what it could extract. Joe had been the one to brief them. Senior diplomatic liaison, calm-voiced, with the kind of eyes that had seen too many negotiations collapse on day 11. "You are not soldiers," she'd said, standing before the 12 of them in a prefab briefing room. "You are not scientists, officially. You are presence. You are proof. Do not forget that. Me, Dr. Amelia Cho, whom everyone called me because she'd once accidentally signed a mission log me instead of her initials, had raised her hand. "And if they test us?" "Then you pass," Joe said simply. New York had laughed at that. Nyasha Oduya, the team's xenobiologist, the one who'd spent 6 years studying Varan pack behavior from satellite data and 3 weeks trying to convince everyone that the species' primary threat display was, functionally, a hug. "They're going to test us immediately," New York had said. "And it's going to be with something small and helpless, because that's how predator-adjacent species assess caregiving capability. Watch." She had been right. On the 3rd day of the exchange, a creche keeper at the station's rearing quarters had presented Mara with a bundle. Not officially. Not as a test, not in writing. Just a bundle, placed in her arms, and 12 sets of Varan eyes watching from across the hall to see what the human would do. What the human did was look down at the scrap of gray fur, feel the heartbeat against her palm like a small motor running too fast, and say, very quietly, very honestly, "Oh, you're frightened." Kale had opened one eye. That was all it took. In the weeks that followed, Mara learned things no diplomatic briefing had covered. She learned that Varan cubs chose their bonded caretakers the way lightning chose its path, not by logic, not by proximity, but by some quality in the air that couldn't be measured. She learned that Kale preferred being held against her left shoulder because her heartbeat was clearest there. She learned that when he was startled, he made a sound like a kettle about to boil, and that the correct response was to press 2 fingers gently behind his left ear until the sound stopped. She learned these things because Dai taught her. Dai, the creche keeper, ancient by Varan standards, with fur gone silver and eyes the color of deep water, had watched Mara with Kale for 4 days before approaching. When she spoke, Hai translated. Hai was the station's official interpreter, a young Varan who'd learned 6 human languages by listening to intercepted radio signals for a decade, which should have been alarming but was, in context, deeply endearing. Dai says, Hai had translated carefully, that the cub has made his selection. She asks if the human understands what this means. "Tell her I think I do," Mara said. "Tell her I'm honored." Hai translated. Dai listened. Then the old creche keeper had said something long and grave, and Hai's expression had shifted into something carefully neutral. "She says," Hai said, "that honor is not the correct response. The correct response is readiness. She says the cub will carry your pattern in his memory for the rest of his life." She says you should think carefully about what pattern you intend to leave. Mara had looked at Kale, asleep against her collarbone, his breath warm and small and terrifyingly trusting. Tell her, Mara said, that I intend to leave a good one. Wa had tried to warn her. Wotan Kellerman, the team medic, the most pragmatic human Mara had ever met, had pulled her aside in the corridor one evening, 2 weeks in. You know you're leaving in a month, he said. Not cruelly. Just the way was said everything, with the bluntness of someone who'd learned that kindness without honesty was just delay. I know, Mara said. The bonding isn't metaphorical for them, was said. It's neurological. If you leave without a proper transition. I know, Wa. He looked at her for a long moment. Do you have a plan? She hadn't answered him then. She was supposed to have a plan. She'd read the literature. New York had sent her 3 separate research papers on managed caretaker transition in bonded Varan cubs. There was a protocol. It was humane and evidence-based, and it made complete, logical sense. She had carried Kale through every corridor of the station at least twice. She had learned his sounds and his fears and the specific angle at which he liked to be tilted when he finally fell asleep. She had read him her mission logs aloud at night because the sound of her voice settled him faster than anything else, and she had long since stopped feeling self-conscious about it. She had not made a plan, because some part of her had believed, foolishly and stubbornly, that she had more time. Now the boarding ramp hummed beneath her feet and Kale's grip tightened on her finger and Mara stood very still. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Joe, New York, me, Wei, her whole team, gathered at a respectful distance. And Dai, and Hai beside her. And a dozen Varan station workers who had no official reason to be in this section of the docking bay but were here anyway. Watching. Mara crouched down so she was eye level with the carrier platform where Kale sat. His eyes were open now, pale amber, still and wide, watching her face the way young creatures watch when they are trying to memorize something they are afraid of losing. Hey, she said softly. I'm not gone yet. His grip loosened, slightly. Just slightly. I'm coming back, she said. This is not the kind of goodbye that means gone. This is the kind that means wait for me. Hai translated, quietly, for the benefit of those watching. Mara heard the words ripple through the gathered Varans like something released. Kale made the kettle sound, high, thin, anxious. Mara pressed 2 fingers behind his left ear until it stopped. I know, she said. I know. I'll be back in 60 days. Dai will keep you. Hai will remind you. And I am going to think about you every single day of those 60 days, and when I come back you'll be twice as big and half as scared, and you're going to act like you barely remember me. She smiled. Her voice only cracked a little. But you will. Kale looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the gravity of a very small creature making a very large decision, he released her finger. He held his own paw out instead, open, upturned. It took Mara 2 full seconds to understand what he was offering. She pressed her palm gently against his paw, the way she'd seen Dai do it. A seal. A promise in a language older than diplomacy. Behind her, she heard Hai make a quiet sound, not quite a word, something more like recognition. What did that mean? Wa murmured. It means, Hai said softly, that he accepts the waiting. Mara stood up. She shouldered her bag. She walked up the ramp. She did not look back, because if she looked back she was not confident she would keep walking. But she heard, carried across the docking bay just before the airlock sealed, a sound she had learned to recognize. Not the kettle pitch of fear. Something lower, steadier, with a rhythm like a small heart deciding to be brave. It was the sound Kale made when he was settling in to sleep. When he had decided, against all evidence, to trust that morning was still coming. Mara Ellison pressed her back against the sealed airlock door and closed her eyes and did not cry, exactly, but did something very close to it, and thought. 60 days. Wait for me. Somewhere in the rearing quarters of Orbital Station Vareth, a small gray cub with amber eyes curled against a creche keeper's side and breathed slowly and waited. He was very good at waiting. He had learned it from a human.